Well, we are at it again. We are we're going a little bit ham on good old Nick here. I do like him. He's a good dude. When I saw this, it came up in my recommendation. I just have to fucking watch. I haven't watched it yet. It's like there will never be a year of the Linux desktop, but. And I've always said myself, I've been around Linux for 24 plus years, okay? The year of the Linux desktop is something that's been talked about since 2000. If it comes, it comes, but the way Linux is done, no. Let's get into this little thing here.
This is Nick, and if you've been looking up stuff online about Linux, you absolutely have come across this phrase. This is the year of the Linux desktop. Is it this year? Was it last year? Is it next year? What does it mean? No one even knows. My opinion is that there will never be a specific year of the Linux desktop. But it's not because Linux is not good enough, will never grow, or will never win against Windows or macOS, whatever that means. Let's discuss. But let's also discuss why you should check out today's sponsor to get
Within 32 seconds, we already had one ad, the bar ad that came up here, the lower third ad. I think that's YouTube themselves doing that. He's just set an ad break in there. It could also have been an ad break, where it just breaked up. And now we have his sponsor, but he's luckily enough, he knows we don't want to watch that shit, so we can skip it down here. But come on, dude, don't do that. And I'm sure he had a fucking... Does he have an ad sponsor in the beginning? In the end? Yep, he had a sponsor at the end of the video. He's not respecting you as a viewer.
So, is 2022 the year of the Linux desktop?
Yep.
No,
hey.
It isn't. But what does that even mean in the first place? The general consensus is that the famed year of the Linux desktop is the year where Linux finally gets to a point where any average user would have heard about it and would have no reservations to install it themselves.
No. Listen to an OG here, my boy. The year of the Linux desktop originally started as it was the start of the popularity rise of Linux. It was when Linux started to become relevant on the desktop, meaning it started to grow exponentially and probably got even bigger or as big as macOS and Windows. It was not that, okay, now we have owning anything or everyone knows about. No, this was the year Linux took off. Like we just went up on a fucking rocket ship and went up into space with our popularity and with our user base. Most people know about Linux nowadays, especially tech people.
Easily on their own devices. It also entails that the general public would encounter no major issues that couldn't be solved very easily, either through a search engine or through tools available.
I never heard that. In my 24 plus years with Linux, that has never been talked about. But it is a good metrics for success, that everything just works and it's easy to fix. I will not fault him too much and say, oh, well, this should not be what we strive for. It's a really good metrics, but I haven't heard anyone say that, oh, when everything just works and it's easily fixable, that would be the year of the Linux desktop. It has always been. When Linux starts to become mainstream, popular, and keep growing. That's always been the year of the Linux desktop.
On the system itself. So basically, it would be the year where Linux is finally good enough for the average consumer, the average user. And there's also an added expectation that Linux would then start growing up and eat Windows or macOS.
Yeah, that was what we talked about 20 years ago. So he needs to do some more research, man. What this sounds like, I haven't watched this video, but it sounds like he's lowering the threshold of what the year of the Linux desktop is and what Linux needs to do to become popular enough or good enough to be the year of the Linux desktop. In reality, there are only one metric that counts: success. Okay, it's a really dopey fucking face there, but it's success.
OS's market share until it surpasses them. In my opinion, that is not something that can happen. But before you whip out your pitchforks and try to burn me alive...
I thought he said pitchforks, not pitchforks, but yeah.
Let me explain. Linux is already good enough. It might sound like pure fanboyism,
It is, because Linux is not good enough. Here's the thing. I have a problem with anyone saying anything is good enough. Because then you are slowing down innovation, you're slowing down working on the product. Why should I make a better UI? It's good enough. Why should I fix these features? It's good enough. Why should I lose more weight? I'm fat enough, or you get what I'm saying. Why should I run more? I'm healthy enough. When you say this, it's good enough, it's a cop-out. It's a cop-out, and this is speech that you hear a lot with people that don't want to put in the effort to do something, or people that are not successful. Oh, it's good enough for what I want it to be. Or it's good enough for the goal I have. Or it's good enough for me. Or I feel that I'm healthy enough. You don't hear successful people say this. You don't hear CEOs say this. You don't hear Windows say this. You don't hear Apple and Mac people say this. You only hear this with Windows, Linux people. Oh, it's good enough as it is. No, it's not. And even if Linux was the primarily majority desktop operating system, it will never be good enough. Because if you start to think it's good enough, you are shooting yourself in the foot, you are tying yourself to a fucking pole, and you're letting ants crawl up into all your cavities and eat you up from the inside. It's so fucking bad. Never rest on your laurels. Never say, oh, it's good enough now.
But the vast majority of people using a computer don't need most of what Windows or macOS offer. They generally don't even know half of the features of these operating systems.
And that's the point why I say the same about Linux. You don't know anything about Linux. Oh, well, that came out wrong. You don't know all the things Linux can do for you, so why? You don't use all the features on your phone. Should you then stop using a phone? Again, he's finding excuses where Linux has to look better than it is in this situation. And again, you see this a lot with people that are championing something that's not popular, or they want something to succeed that's not succeeding, or they want themselves to look better if they are not looking that good. You know, they are not number 1, number 2, number 3.
They also don't need most of the apps available there. They need a web browser, and Linux has all of the web browsers. Linux is good enough to be used by the vast majority of people.
Yeah, it's good enough to be used. But why should they change from Windows then, if it's only good enough? You should only change if you get something that's better than what you already have. If it's the exact same experience, why should you change? And I know you guys will, oh, well, open source and license. Fuck that shit. Nobody gives a fuck. When I say it like this, I mean most people don't. And they should not. Do you care about the trading philosophies, the production philosophies of your phone? Do you care about how the workers are being treated, and if there's open source or open hardware in here, or if there is licensing issues within the phone that you're using, or the bed that you have, the bricks that you're using? No, you don't give a fuck. And that's how most people look at a computer. So why should they go from Windows to Linux and they say, hey, it's the same. You can do the same shit. This is like fanboyism making you blind.
Who could absolutely use LibreOffice for the very few times they need to write a cover letter, a curriculum vitae, or do a home budget.
But what if they don't want to? Here's the thing. His mindset is, if you can, you should. He knows what's best for you. He knows what you should be running, and that's LibreOffice because you can. People that talk like that run away because they don't have your interest at heart. They don't care about you. They only care about promoting this software, or this ideology, or this philosophy, or whatever the fuck it is that they want to promote. Because if he cared about you, he would be saying, you can do this, but if you don't want to, it's up to you.
It's a matter of habit, not of quality.
No.
And so if...
No. I need to be more calm in these videos. My blood pressure can't take it. He wants you to. That's the problem here. It's about habits. Well, if you are happy with your habits, let them stay. Like, he should be saying, yeah, he could say, hey, you can change. If you want, you can use LibreOffice. But if you are happy and you have no problem with whatever fucking Google Docs you're using or whatever, you should not change. This is one of the biggest problems happened with these kind of people here, is that they already know what you should be running. They know what is best for you before you know it. He haven't sat down and talked to you. He haven't listened to your needs and wants and your habits and your expectations, your workflow, your habits and all of that shit. He only care about one thing: promoting Linux and free and open source.
If Linux is good enough, is this the year of the Linux desktop? Is it already past? No, because quality has never been the factor that would let Linux grow and finally beat every other OS.
Kinda. Like, you need quality. I don't care what everyone else say. If you have crappy software, nobody will use it. If Linux was really good and had really good quality software, everyone would be using it.
In terms of quality, Linux is already there. The Linux desktop has progressed in leaps and...
Again, the Linux desktop is good enough. No, it's not. Refer to my previous statement.
...bounds over the past 10 to 15 years. Ubuntu made it more popular and well-known, and together with other user-facing distros and GNOME and KDE and the rest of the community, they made our desktops more usable, 100% usable.
You could debate that GNOME made the desktop less useful. Just put it out there.
By any idiot, myself included. We now have automatic printer detection on networks. We have solid driver support from most manufacturers.
DPI scaling, HDR support. Do I need to go on? That's stuff that's not in there, by the way. There's a lot of technologies that we just don't have yet in Linux that has been in Windows for 5-6 years that a massive amount of users are utilizing on a daily basis. It's just a fact. If we don't have the newer technologies, why should they use us?
We have tons of amazing apps that definitely can handle most people's needs. We have gaming with Steam, Heroic, Lutris, and the Steam...
Don't get me started on gaming under Linux. It's great. It's come a long, long, long way. But it's not as good as under Windows. And a lot of programs or games don't run as good or look as good. And again, they are not utilizing the new technologies with the graphic cards that Windows do. HDR. What the fuck is the Nvidia one with the upscale, downscale, and upscale, and all of that fucking shit? Like DSLR, I think it's called. There are plenty of technologies on the gaming side that Linux just don't support.
Steam Deck is proof of how well that works. We have more hardware support than ever before, with Dell, Lenovo, and even Razer.
But we still don't have the same hardware support as Windows.
Selling computers with Linux pre-installed, albeit not very prominently. We have brand
and they are also quite expensive.
recognition thanks to Android and Chrome OS.
Android and Chrome OS is not Linux, okay? It's a fork of Linux. They are starting to make their Android kernel, which is also running on Chrome OS, being more compatible with the mainstream kernel. But even if you ask the fucking Android developers, they are saying Android is not Linux.
Most people have heard about Linux, although maybe not on the desktop side of things. Fragmentation is a thing of the past, thanks to Flatpak, Snap, or app images.
What fucking rock does he live under? It's still a fucking problem. It's not just... The biggest problem is not package fragmentation, you fucking fool, okay? It's distribution fragmentation. And flat packages and snap packages don't help that because people are fighting and bitching and moaning over which package format to go with. Has it helped a little bit that you use snaps under all distributions and flaps under all distributions? Yeah. One distribution is using that, another distribution is using snaps, and a third distribution is using none of them. We are still fragmented, we're just not as fragmented.
With these packaging formats, no matter what distro you use, you can run anything. Is that still fragmentation? Well, that's 3 ways of packaging your apps compared to the previous tens of packages you needed to support most Linux distros before.
No, there was... In reality, there were 3 or 2 before. There were RPM and deb files. That was like the golden standard for package format within Linux. deb and RPM. Most other distributions that run their own package manager have a really easy script that converts debs and RPMs into their native package format, or they can even run and install deb or RPM. Now we have app images, snap packages, and flat packages. One more. Plus deb and RPM. Have we solved anything here, or have we added to the complexity? Hand motions.
And let's be honest, most people just provide a Flatpak or a Snap. And let's be more honest.
No. Most people, they just go onto the software center. Oh, that looks neat. Boing! Install. They don't give a fuck what package format it's under.
Flatpak is definitely the community's choice over Snaps. Also, our...
Again. Data. I hate when people throw that out there without data. I want to see data. I want to see that the community like Flatpaks better than Snap packages, because that's not what I see and what I hear. To me, it's a little bit, either it's 50-50 or people have problems with both.
Communities have never been as dynamic as they are today.
Wrong!
We have tons of new applications, updates all around, all year long, on our desktop environments, on our applications.
That's the same for Windows, Mac, FreeBSD, Haiku. What the fuck is he talking about? Dude.
On the
I'm waiting for an ad, by the way. When is the next ad coming up?
underlying technologies with Wayland, Pipewire, and Flatpak. There are very few things that you cannot do today on Linux that you could do on Windows.
Yeah, but that's not the point. Just because you can do it don't mean that you should do it. Why do you buy a new car? Why do you buy a new house? Why do you buy a new bicycle? Because the old one is not doing the job anymore, or you have some other reasons why you need to move to a new house. You don't just move or buy a new car because, oh, well, let's just buy a new car. Unless you fucking have more money than you can think of. Most people don't change anything unless it gives them a reason to. It's cheaper, it's better, it's more stable, it's run faster, it does something for them that their current product that they are using or having don't do. Again, he's telling you that if you can switch to Linux, you should switch to Linux. And what do you say you have to do about people like that? Run away, because they don't care about what your needs is, what your want is, and what you want to do. It's only what they want you to do.
Or macOS. The quality of the Linux desktop cannot be questioned. So sure, some people will say that some stuff doesn't work perfectly for them. Some will say that they can't still play their favorite game.
He really likes those accent callers.
Some will say they hate Flatpak or Pipewire or Wayland or whatever modern system is being implemented at the moment. We have the quality. So why do people think Linux desktops aren't ready?
Because it's not giving them a reason to change.
To begin the year of the Linux desktop. The issue here is that Linux is generally never compared on an equal footing.
What? What the fuck are you smoking? How is it unfair compared? My thing don't work under Linux. I can't use Linux at work. The open source equivalent software that I need to use is not good enough, or not stable enough, or don't do it as fast. How is that an unfair comparison? Dear fucking God, if you're up there, like, what the fuck have you done with this creature?
With Windows or with macOS. People are comparing running Linux on a device that's never been designed to run it.
So we can't... Dude, please. So we can't compare... Okay. Any of you guys out there and girls, any of you content creators that are comparing Linux with Windows, you can only compare Linux if it's running on certified Linux hardware. What is that? That will probably be a laptop that's built for Linux. So a System 76 laptop, for example. If you're not doing that, you're not comparing Linux correctly to Windows. I say this with all due respect, dear little Nick, but have you just fucking ran your head into a wall or something like that? It makes no fucking sense.
Running apps that they're unfamiliar with, or even running apps that have never been designed to run on Linux in the first place.
What are you talking about?
That's not only unfair, it's also dishonest.
No, it's not. It's not. So he said, like, okay, not only should you switch to Linux, but you also have to buy a fucking new computer or laptop to run it. Is that what he's saying? He's using a Slimbook. That's a Linux machine, and I forgot to take off auto exposure. I'm really sorry for that. So this is exactly why people don't want to. If this is what he believes, people will not change to Linux for this.
Compare something pre-installed, for which hardware has been tested, to a freely installed piece of software that you decided to install yourself without the support of the manufacturer. We can't compare a program we've known and used for years to something we're just learning to use. We can't compare running a game made for a specific OS and set of libraries to running it on a completely different platform that was never intended to run it, at least not by the developers.
So he's also saying that all Proton games is not a fair comparison. You can only compare native developed Linux games to native compared Windows games. Please help me understand this logic. This is like finding excuses. Like, I'm speechless. I don't know what to say. It's like I need to find some excuses why Linux is actually better than people think it is, and he's pulling this out of his fucking ass. No, just no, please no, don't, no. This is not how it works. A lot of people are using Windows on hardware it's not meant to be run on. You know, they build their own PCs and they run Windows on it. I'm one of them. If I can't do the same with Linux, if I can only run Linux and it's only fair to run Linux if I buy a fucking laptop that's pre-installed with Linux or computer, you are smoking something you should not be smoking.
Well, yes, we can, and it turns out we can even beat the native platform in some cases. Elden Ring.
Yeah, that's one game. One fucking game. This is the fucking stupidest fucking argument for Linux ever. They find one game or two games that run better than under Windows, and now, yep, Linux gaming, by far the best gaming platform. It's not about how one game runs. What about 10 games, 100 games, 1,000 games?
What I mean is that Linux is still, in the overwhelming majority of cases, a system you install instead of what the manufacturer chose to provide. This means that by definition, it has to work extra hard to offer the same level of integration and of hardware support.
No. That's untrue. Just because Linux don't come pre-installed with computers don't mean that, because we're not getting pre-installed, we have to work harder to have hardware compatibility. No. It just means that Linux people or Linux distributions are not talking to hardware developers. And that's also not the case. Ubuntu is in contact with a lot of hardware developers to make Ubuntu work on that hardware.
An apples to apples comparison, no Mac pun intended, would be comparing the level of functionality of a laptop with Linux pre-installed to the same laptop with Windows pre-installed.
So not gaming performances, not gaming capabilities, not what software runs that you need to be running. Again, he's not listening to you what you need. He's telling you what to do.
In these cases, a Linux desktop does work just as well as Windows does.
Yeah, but that's one thing of the whole, or one point of what you would call, of what makes a computing experience, or it's one thing that is together with a lot of other parts that makes it useful for some people and not for other people. You know, like, yeah, maybe the desktop is great, but what if my program don't work? Yeah, maybe my game runs great, but what if my software I need for work is not running under Linux? There's so many things. He has gone down. Like, this is like, I'm not saying Linux is shit, but he's basically drove down into a fucking pile of shit and found small little diamonds and say, look, that pile is a diamond pile. It's full of diamonds, and then he's showing you 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 diamonds to make you believe that it's a pile of diamonds and not a pile of shit. And I'm not saying it's shit, but it gives you like an idea of like how misrepresenting he is, how he's misrepresenting Linux right now.
and even outperforms it in a few cases, like
Yeah.
resource usage, general reactivity, or privacy. Battery life, unfortunately, is still a sore spot, but who needs 17 hours of battery on their laptop? No one needs that. That's oh crap, my camera is dying. The point is, if we're going to try and argue that Linux isn't ready for most people, let's at least argue from an equal standpoint, with a system pre-installed on hardware, sold by a manufacturer. And then it becomes way harder to say that Linux desktops...
No, it don't. Previous statements. Does it run the things I need it to run? Does it do it better than what I already have?
But if the Linux desktop is good enough, then does that mean that the year of the Linux desktop has already happened? Well, no, not really. Because we're still not at a point where most people would even consider using Linux as their daily driver. There are still way too much bad first impressions floating around, too many preconceived notions about Linux. Dispelling them is also part of the process to make the year of the Linux desktop.
Yeah, and he's definitely not doing it because he's selling you a pile of diamonds. And when he's delivering that pile of diamonds, you will realize that you only got 5 or 6 diamonds and the rest is fucking just a pile of turds.
Happen. And that can only come from using a Linux desktop itself. Can you see how this might be a problem? People don't use Linux because they're afraid it's too technical, or they don't know about it, or they had a first contact 5 or 6 years ago with it and they didn't like it. And then Linux doesn't get more use, and then those preconceived notions just never disappear. The actual quality of Linux doesn't matter. The year of the Linux desktop can only happen if people know and believe that Linux is good enough, not when Linux actually is good enough, which happened a while ago for me and probably a few years ago for most people. The quality doesn't matter if people don't even give Linux a try. And regular people will not install any OS from the internet and replace the default. People don't even replace most of the default apps on their phones, which makes the battle giant tech companies fight to prevent that from happening even more stupid, but that's not the point. If we can't get Johnny, my phone is fine as it is, to replace their web browser, how are we gonna get Jane, my PC works well already, to install Linux? And
Why should you? The only way you can do that is getting pre-installed hardware, as he talked about. But he's kind of hinting at we should kind of force them to change. Again, not listening to you. He should be saying, if you're one of those people that my phone is good enough as it is, or my PC is good enough as it is, stay where the fuck you are. If it's a Mac, stay with your Mac. If it's a Windows, stay with your Windows. Those people will never change to Linux. Could they run Linux? Yeah, probably. Will they change? Well, if they buy a new fucking computer with Linux on it, they will change. But until then, no. And they should not, because they're happy where they are.
And once again, we end up at the same point I've been trying to hammer over and over again. Linux needs hardware to be used more, to be known more. Hardware sold in retail stores.
It don't matter if the software that they want to run is not compatible with it. Killer apps, killer apps, killer apps make or break a gaming console. Killer apps make or break what's the most popular fucking device out there. Phones, whatever the fuck it is. You want Linux to become more popular, give them the apps that they want, or make apps that's better than what's on the Windows side, so people want to use Linux. You can pre-install Linux on all the fucking computers in the world. If it don't have the apps that people want to run, not what they can run or should run, but what they want to run, they will install Windows, or they will call up their nephew that's 11 years old and, can you come over with a Windows USB and install it for me because I can't get Photoshop to work, or this legacy fucking dongle I've been using since the 80s is not working, or this software I've been using since the 90s is not working. Yeah, he will come over and do it for them. Apps, 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 not hardware.
Hardware that people can actually try and buy. Once that happens, then sure, the year of the Linux desktop might start to happen. Until then, I don't think it ever will. And sure, as I mentioned, that part is slowly starting to change. We have big manufacturers selling laptops with Linux pre-installed.
But they don't sell that well. And If you want Linux computers, you need a Linux computer in the $200 market. And not an Android like a Chrome OS. You need a $200, $300 laptop from Dell, HP, whatever the fuck it is with Linux on it. Because most people, they buy the cheapest fucking entry-level laptop or computer they can get away with because they only need to do the bare minimum. And if Linux is not represented in that price gap, it don't matter. Of course, apps.
Have the Steam Deck, which might not advertise Linux specifically, but it's still Linux hardware. The issue is, these things aren't really available in retail stores. Where
you want a Unix-like system that's been available in stores since 2000 that runs a Unix-like system that's run BSD or a version of FreeBSD. Go look at your PlayStation and then go look at how much better that have improved gaming on the FreeBSD. Even Nintendo have been using Linux. I don't know if they do it anymore, but they did it in the late 90s, early 2000s on their Nintendo machines. Just putting it out there.
people can open them, play around, look at the UI, get a feel for it, and see how fun and nice looking or speedy it can be. It's a first step, but it's not solving the issue, not yet. All of this hardware is still designed for enthusiasts mostly, not for the general public.
Nope.
There is also a notion that the Linux desktop needs to beat Windows or macOS in terms of market share to finally be successful, that it needs to overtake both of them. And fortunately, that is not the case, or the year of the Linux desktop might be even more impossible than I think it already is. macOS is proof that an OS doesn't need 50% or more market share to have a nice, healthy community. Well, healthy might be a bit of an overstatement, because most Apple fanboys will defend anything that has an Apple logo on it.
And Linux fanboys don't do that. You don't do that. This video is proof that will contradict that. If you want to talk about toxic fanboys, look no further than your own fucking community, man. Like, honestly, don't.
If you think I'm trolling or I'm being hateful, just look at what people are saying to defend the position of the charging port on the Magic Mouse. Yeah. Linux also doesn't need to reach 50% market share to have some impact, to have more third-party app developers' attention, to have slots in retail.
No, it makes sense. You just need to be relevant enough in the market that it makes financial sense for the companies to support you. That's all you need. Is it 10%? Is it 5%? Is it 15%? Who knows? But you need to have a big enough presence in a market that companies can make enough money, so they will not ignore you anymore.
Stores and more. With about 8 to 10%, there would be enough of a market for companies to view Linux as a healthy potential market for their stuff. At 8 to 10%, you get the likes of Adobe, Microsoft Office, better versions of Zoom or Teams, better support for the latest Linux stack, like Wayland or Flatpak or Pipewire. At this kind of market share, you basically get what most people have been saying Linux lacks to grow. You get the apps that people already know and already use. I'm not sure which should come first though. The growth, which doesn't need the apps to happen, or the apps which definitely do need the growth to happen.
Well, you need both. You need the growth so the apps can get... So it makes sense for the apps to be ported to it. How you get there is a totally different beast. And here's the thing, I don't think there is a market for Linux on the desktop. We have Windows, and most people, like 19 or 99% of people that are using Windows, are happy with Windows. There's macOS, 19 or 95% or 1999 or whatever the fuck number you throw in there that's high up there, of Mac users are happy with macOS.
Linux is currently at around 2% market share on the desktop. That's too small to matter for most people. Too small for...
And it's been like that almost since 2000. I'm just saying. When Windows Vista came around and Windows 8, we got a spike. I think the highest we've been up is like 7%, depending on what polls you're looking at and what metrics you're looking at. And that was around the Vista area. But on average, this is like actually last time I looked at was for the February. It was in February, and we were under 1% for that month. Under 1%. So 2% will be kind of average. I think like 1 to 2% is average Linux has been at if you average it out over those 22 years that if you take from 2000 to now. When Windows went down, Mac OS went up. When Mac OS went down, Windows went up. Linux just stayed the same. If you want to predict future behavior, it's a really good indicator to look at past behavior. And we have 30-something years of Linux to look at right now, or at least 20 years on the desktop market for Linux to look at. Or at least 10 if you want like good desktop experience. And we stayed around the fucking same.
Retail stores to take a chance on selling Linux hardware.
They have done that, by the way. Linux has been sold in retail stores many times. They never sold. He needs to do his fucking research.
And too small for big companies to take an interest in. At 8 to 10%, you definitely erase most of these issues. And some will say that people would not buy anything with Linux pre-installed on it, because it doesn't run the same apps they're used to.
Exactly.
And I totally disagree. People
Why?
buy Chromebooks in droves, and Chrome OS doesn't run Microsoft Office.
No, but Chrome OS runs what's on here. That's why they're doing it. It's Chrome OS is more or less your mobile phone in a computer. That's why they're doing it, Nick. So if you're used to run apps on here, Chromebook is your choice. That's the whole spiel of a Chromebook. It's like this mix between a tablet and a computer. Again, missing the fucking point about Chrome OS.
It doesn't run Photoshop, and most Chromebooks don't run Steam either. Still, these devices get sold. Linux devices in stores would also get sold. The year of the Linux.
So if that is the case, there have been plenty years in the past where Linux have been companies have tried to sell Linux in stores. In the early 2000s, in the late zeros, in the early 10s, and I think also in the mid 10s. Why did they stop then? Like, why did they stop? Because Linux from 2010 and Linux now, the biggest difference is more hardware capability and Steam. Everything else is almost the same. You still can't run the software people expect to run on a desktop or a laptop. We have alternatives, but it's not what they want. The reasons why people left Linux back then was not because of the software. It was because not because of the hardware. It was because they couldn't run the things they wanted to run. Same problem we have today.
Linux desktop can only happen once the general public is completely comfortable trying, buying, and using a Linux device. Until then, it's an also ran that requires users to go out of their way to replace the default and deal with the potential hardware issues. This is why I think there will never be a year of the Linux desktop. There will never be a specific year where in Walmarts, in Fnacs, or whatever else, you find all of a sudden tons of Linux.
That has actually happened. Again, if he researches his subject a little bit better, he will see that people have tried that. I actually think it was Walmart in like the mid zeros to late zeros that we had Linux machines in there.
Desktops and laptops. It will happen, but as a trickle, slowly, over time. It won't happen in 1 year.
If it happens slowly over time, don't you think the market share should have gone up on average over the last 22 years? It has not.
And so there will never be a specific point marked that means this is where Linux started really beating the crap out of Windows. The quality of Linux desktops is already absolutely good enough for most people. Whether you prefer GNOME or KDE or Cinnamon, all are...
That alone is a fucking problem that we have different desktop managers or Windows managers.
Good enough for most people. They're simple to get to grips with, they offer fast and fluid experiences.
So do Windows, so do Mac OS. They are fast, they are fluent.
And all have a wealth of apps that anyone can get.
Windows have more, Mac OS have more.
Get used to in a few hours of use. In a way, I think, no, there won't be a year of the Linux desktop, but there will be a decade of the Linux desktop.
No, there
decade
won't. We have already had 3 decades of Linux, 2 where it was kind of compatible on the desktop. And if you will be really skeptical, you'll say we have had maybe 1.5 decade where Linux desktop was actually really good. And nothing have happened. Nothing. Look at the Linux market share over the last just 10 years, the last decade. It's the same. Like, it's the same. What the fuck is it that Einstein is saying? What is the definition of insanity to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome? We need to do something different because we are doing the same fucking shit over and over and over again and still waiting for Linux to take off. Something is not working. We need to do something different.
Over which Linux grows into its own and starts being accepted and used by more people. And I think we already entered that decade. In the meantime,
Why has the market share not fucking gone anywhere?
It means that we will still do things as we've always done them. Slowly, but steadily. And we know what wins the race.
Again. We have been doing the same shit over and over again for over 20 years. Nothing have happened. We need to do something different. Because when Linux becomes better, Windows becomes better. When Linux becomes better, Mac OS becomes better.
Just like today's sponsor, Slim.
Again, sponsor number 2. I will stop here. It's a long one. This has not been a really bad one with ads, but again, 2 fucking in-video sponsors. Nick, you are ruining the fucking viewing experience. And research your fucking subjects. And just because we get better desktop environments, just because we get a better kernel, we get better GIMP version, don't matter because every time we become better, the competition gets better. It's the people that goes back to Windows we need to catch. And when I say go back to Windows, I mean they use a previous version of Windows. They don't use the current version of Windows. Those are the people we need to catch because they are apparently frustrated enough with Windows that they are going out of their way to run an older version of Windows. People that are happy and running Windows right now, there's no need for them to change. Why should they? Linux today is still not better than Windows 7 and Windows 8. I'm sorry to say it, on a technology level, on a usability level, on an accessibility level, even the technologies that Linux, Windows 7 and Windows 8 support out of the box, Linux is not there. We're not even compatible, meaning that we're not even providing the same experience. HDR, DSLR, a lot of technologies that people are using nowadays are still not in Linux. And if he believes that Linux is already good enough, he's saying exactly what Einstein said is insanity. He's just let Linux just do exactly what it's doing right now, then it will be better. We've been doing that for over 20 years, man. I honestly don't know how he thinks. It's out of my grasp that people can think like that. See you all later. Bye-bye.